Hello, today's April 1st. It's our last day of instruction for the Cold War. Okay, we're just going to go over the end of communism. We've already kind of touched on it during our political and economic systems units as to why it does not work as a economic and political system. So ultimately, communism doesn't work. The Soviet Union falls apart in 1991, effectively ending the Cold War. Some reasons why the Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore. They run out of money because they're spending tons of money on war and controlling their people and the space race, and it just does not generate as much money as capitalism can. There is also no incentive for the people to work harder, so they just do the bare minimum, if even that, right? If everybody has a guaranteed salary, no matter how hard you work, after 70 years, people didn't believe in the communist idea as much as they did during the 1920s and 30s and 40s when communism was really working well for the Soviet Union. Because people were not producing as much as they should have at factories or at work, they were running out of consumer goods. There wasn't enough food to go around, and ultimately the government loses that tight control over its population. There's also, at this point, a lot of nationalist movements like there were in the 1950s and 60s. However, the difference is the Soviet Union does not have the military strength anymore to put them down harshly. So the most successful one was in Poland, Lech Walesa. He works as a dockhand, taking the goods off of ships as they come into harbors and ports, and he eventually he leads this nationalist movement and becomes the first president of a free Poland. And then also we have some policies within the Soviet Union that lead to its downfall. So the last Soviet dictator is Mikhail Gorbachev. You can definitely recognize him by the blood spot birthmark on his head. It's right here. It's definitely noticeable in all cartoons, all posters. It's something you should definitely remember him. Not necessarily that doesn't define him, but it is an easy way to recognize who it is if he ever shows up in any kind of local cartoon or poster that you have a question on. So Mikhail Gorbachev is the last dictator of the Soviet Union. He's got two policies that we have to remember. The first is perestroika, which is an attempt to try to move the communist economy towards capitalism. So this actually was successful in China with Deng Xiaoping and the four modernizations, and they allowed other companies to come in and buy land and build factories, which is why so much U.S. goods are produced in China. And Mikhail Gorbachev was trying to do something similar, not necessarily with foreign investment, but with people being able to own their own businesses now in Russia. His second policy is glasnost, which means that the government is no longer going to censor newspapers, radio, TV, propaganda posters. They're going to try to foster in a time period of openness or political dissent where people get to have a little bit more choice or say in their government. Okay. Ultimately, these two ideas just hasten up the downfall of the Soviet Union. We also have the fall or the tearing down of the Berlin Wall in 1989. Citizens from East and West Berlin come out. They realize that the Soviet Union can't stop them anymore. They can't roll in with tanks and stop the tearing down of this wall. And in 1989, you have East Germany and West Germany and West Berlin and East Berlin that were separated for 50 years, all of a sudden united again. We also see as the Soviet Union collapses, we get about 15 new countries that were used to be communist and now are going to move to capitalism and democracy on their own. All right, that's it for the notes. Today's reading is pretty simple. Let's make this a little bigger. Got a couple of pages of reading, and then I think there's 10 questions and a contextualization. Okay. So as you begin, our objective is going to be how did the events of the 1980s and 90s help achieve, maintain, or threaten world peace, ultimately just ending the Cold War. Okay, I'm just going to skip ahead. We have a couple of paragraphs, a couple of questions. Mikhail Gorbachev, really digging into what his policies of glasnost and perestroika were. Some images that show the two leaders of Mikhail Gorbachev and Ronald Reagan working together. Some of the only real leaders of our two countries that were working together. Again, some more images of that, and a couple questions based specifically on Gorbachev and his perestroika and glasnost, and Reagan and Gorbachev working together. A couple of paragraphs on the fall of the Berlin Wall, and then having some of those 15 former Soviet republics declaring their own independence, effectively ending the Soviet Union. Okay, a little bit short reading there. A couple questions. A chart on some of those same former Soviet satellites. Okay. A little bit of reading. Then some two synthesis questions. Finally ending up with a contextualization, combined context expansion sentence activity for the fall of the Berlin Wall. Okay, and we can go over some of this together. And ultimately with the word bank as well. Okay, let's scroll back to the top. Up and up and up. Okay. Almost there. So I don't think I'm going to read as much as I did in the last ones. Okay. Just going over again the end of the Cold War, 1980s and 90s. We got the Soviet Union, the Soviet satellites, all breaking up. We have the Y, glasnost and perestroika, fall of the Berlin Wall. Okay. Let you read all that on your own, answer the questions, and I'll just help you get started with the context of the Berlin Wall. So when is this happening? We could say leading up to 1989 or the 1980s, the late 1900s, all acceptable. Where is this happening? This is happening in Berlin, West and East Berlin, the Soviet republics. Oh my goodness. Republics for the USSR. Why is this happening? We got the failure of communism. We've got glasnost. Please be sure to define it. Perestroika. Again, please be sure to define it because these are terms that are very important. What else? We could probably bring in Mikhail. Anything else? What I have in the word bank, Cold War protests. Okay. I think that's a good start for you to be able to combine all that together. Remember, your event that you are contextualizing is the fall of the Berlin Wall, okay? Not just the Cold War in general, but the fall of the Berlin Wall specifically. And I think that's it. I will let you guys work on your own. I will be on the video chat if you need to talk or ask any questions. All right, have a good day. Tomorrow we start the essay.